Now, obviously we started off talking about some very negative stuff with ISIS, and you've touched on this a little bit already, but I want to make sure we hit this hard enough, and that is for people to live a better life, to live a life that they're proud of, to live a life that that when they die, they don't regret the life that they lived. And for me, I mean, I tell people discipline equals freedom, that the hard work, the doing the right thing. I tell people to write down what you're supposed to do the next day before you go to bed, and then you wake up and you do the things that you're supposed to do. The things that you said you were supposed to do, the things that you actually know are going to make you healthier and faster and smarter and stronger and make you more money and move you forward and help your family. You just write those things down and then you go do them. And that's essentially, you've drawn that out on a large scale and you've described this somewhat with the experiment that you did with people writing down what they're supposed to do, not just tomorrow, but with their life. That's the future authoring program, yeah. And that's really been immensely beneficial for people.
It certainly seems to have been. It's at selfauthoring.com, and we put up a discount code for your listeners. It's WILLINK, awesome. And so they can get 20% off it. And the system allows you to write an autobiography and to analyze your personality flaws and virtues, and to write a future plan. And you can do all of those or one of them. But yeah, it's extremely useful, because one of the things you can be virtually certain of in life is that you don't get something you don't aim at. And one of the things that's interesting about that is often people will keep their goals fuzzy, because one of the problems with specifying your goals is you specify your failures, right? If the goal is really fuzzy, you're not sure when you fail, and then you can fool yourself. Really, but you can kind of keep it foggy. But you make your goals sharp and clear. Then, well, first of all, then you know what to aim at. And what's interesting is, your brain is set up so that it reorganizes the world around your aims. And that's not, I've also written about this in 12 Rules for Life quite extensively, and that's not a metaphor. Like, we don't see much of the world, because there's a lot of the world and there isn't much of us. And so we see what we aim at. We aim with our eyes. And here's an example. So, like, great apes don't really have much of a white in their eyes, but human beings do. And the reason for that is that we've evolved to detect where everyone else is looking. And so if I can't tell where you're looking, I don't know what you're up to. And then, well, over time, that means I can't read you as well, and we're more likely to get in a dispute, and one or the other of us is more likely to get killed. But it also means that your probability of finding a successful mate decreases. So we've evolved to have this very, very visually evident eye. And so when we're looking at each other, we're always looking at our eyes, because then we can tell where someone is pointed, and then we can tell what they're up to. And so we're hunting creatures, like we're aiming at a moving target and trying to track it all the time. And so you have to specify your aim. And the Future Authoring Program helps people specify their aim. And it's more than one aim. It's like you have a highest aim, which you might say is to be a good person. And then I would say, well, there's a more elaborated aim than that. It's like you want to be able to constrain malevolence and work to decrease suffering. It's something like that. That's the highest aim. And then you have to decompose that into the things you do each day, so that there's a definite connection between all the micro actions and the macro aim. And then that gives dignity to what you're doing. So if you're at home with your kids, well, what are you trying to do? Well, you're trying to raise them to be the kind of moral agents that will work to constrain the evil in the world and to reduce suffering. And so that's what you're doing when you're changing a diaper, if you're doing it carefully and with some respect and some love. Like, it's a major league deal to be doing that. And God only knows who your kid's going to be. He could be the kid that shoots up Columbine, or it could be Stalin. That wouldn't be so good. Or he could be someone, or she could be someone who is a positive benefit to the world, And so every child is a whole new realm of possibilities. And so there's dignity in that if you understand that. So the Future Authoring Program anyways helps people lay out a plan. And I always suggest to people that they do it badly, because You're not going to do it perfectly. And if you get perfectionistic, it's going to stop you. You know, when you first start to plan, you're probably only going to be about 20% right. But the difference between 0 and 20% is immense. And we found with our research that even people who only spend an hour on it benefit substantially in their ability to stick to what their next plan is. And you mentioned something earlier too, just a bit ago. Oh yes, about scheduling. Yeah, so one of the things I tell people, so you say write down what you're going to do the next day before you go to bed. That's good, because then you've got a direction set when you wake up in the morning. Okay? But I've told people to learn to use a schedule. And people often hate schedules because they act as their own tyrants, right? They say, well, you have to do this unpleasant thing, and then here's another unpleasant thing you have to do, and then you have to do this unpleasant thing. And you do that for about 3 days, and you think, to hell with this, I'm not doing that, and you fall off the wagon. That isn't what you're supposed to do with a schedule. You're supposed to use it to design the days that you would like to have if you were taking care of yourself. And so some of that is, you wake up in the morning and you think, here's 5 things I have to do that if I don't do, my life will be worse. It's like paying bills, for example, or taking out the garbage. It's like you have to do those because otherwise things degenerate. So you got to put some of those in the schedule, because otherwise tomorrow is worse than today, and that's a bad trajectory. But you also want to build in things, you've got to act in some sense like you're dealing with a relatively recalcitrant 9-year-old. It's like, here's some things you have to do, but here's some things that if you do, you could reward yourself with. And if you get the balance there between obligation and reward right, then you'll find that you're motivated to do the things. And that's what you want to do. You want to do that so it's sustainable across days and weeks and months. And so you got to treat yourself like a good boss would treat a valued employee, and not like a tyrant would treat a slave, because the slave will rebel. And people say, well, I don't follow through on my plans. It's like, well, they're probably not very well formulated, and maybe you're doing them because of an external moral obligation or something. They're not really your plans, right? And B, you're acting like a tyrant and a slave, and that's a bad relationship to have with yourself. So you want to treat yourself with the same way. That's the golden rule, right? Treat yourself as you would treat other people as you would have them. Treat other people as you would like to be treated. It works both ways. You also treat yourself like you treat other people properly. So that's a necessary thing, and often people don't do that. But the scheduling is really important.
Actually, when I tell people, because when I first started talking about this, people would start scheduling their day, and they would just go, minute by minute. Yeah. Everything would be scheduled, and you can't maintain that for multiple reasons. Number one is no one wants to have a day like that, where everything that you do throughout the day, minute to minute, sucks. It's things that you don't want to do. So guess what? After 3 days, you say, I'm not doing this anymore. It sucks. It's not fun. And so the same thing with the task list, people would push those off if they're not on the schedule. So I'd say put it on the schedule. But then the thing I ended up telling people is you need to number one, schedule empty space in there, because things are going to take longer, and then you're going to be off schedule, and then you'll be frustrated. So you schedule that things are going to be just empty. You're not going to do anything for this hour before lunch. You don't schedule anything. You're not going to do anything. You're not going to do anything there. And the other thing is you schedule things that you actually want to do in there, and then you go and execute the things that you want to do. You want to work out every day. You should. Well, maybe if it's something you enjoy, then you schedule it in there. If you enjoy picking your kids up from school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, because that's when they do their running club, then you schedule that in there so you can go and do that thing that you want to do. So you don't just schedule the things that suck. You schedule the good things too. And discipline equals freedom. I say this all the time. If you want to have more free time, which is what people want, then you need to have more disciplined time management. You will end up with more free time. I promise you. You will. The other thing I was thinking about, and I just kind of occurred to me now, is people always tell people, come up with a goal and write it down, and then you're going to get there. And I was, as you were talking about future authoring, what you had said earlier when you were describing the program in its infancy, what became future authoring, is I was saying, well, how do you get people to actually do this? Well, what you've embedded in the program is the fear of what happens if you don't do these things and where you're going to end up. And people forget that. People forget where they end up if they don't do what they're supposed to do in life. And I've explained this to my kids, that when you look around and you see people that are doing things which are self-evidently not desirable things to be doing in life, whether you're a bum or whether you're doing I was a dishwasher as well, and I have an interesting story about that, and I'll tell that at some point, about a Scottish girl named Rosalind. She was older than me. I was 13, and after several weeks of washing dishes, and she was like maybe 17 or 18, and anyways, to make a long story short, eventually I said, hey, do you want to like go to a movie or something with me? Because I'd like to go to a movie with you. And she looked at me and she said, Jocko, you have a serious mental problem. So Rosalind, I know you're out there somewhere. You broke my heart, sister. But I wash dishes, and that's a good thing for a 13-year-old to do. But when you're 18, okay, now it's a little bit, you want to have moved up to be the short order cook. And by the time you're 25, you want to be in charge of the whole kitchen. And by the time you're 30, you want to maybe run the nighttime shift. And that's a good progression, and that's good. But you don't want to be 35 and 40 years old out at the dishwashing stage. You don't want to be there. And I explain to my kids, because you can see people that are at that stage in their life. And sure, there's a chance that maybe they had some hardship that came along that hit them, and it put them in this position, and now they have to build back up again, and they're waiting for those windows of or doors of opportunity to open up, and that's okay. But a lot of times, it's because they didn't work. They didn't make good decisions. They didn't do the best job that they could. And so they end up in these positions that they shouldn't be in. And I tell my kids that those are real people that are in those positions. Like, we're going to leave this restaurant and we're going to go home and we're going to do what we do. That guy's going to be there for 5 more hours because it's 9 o'clock. He's got to clean everything when they get done. He's going to be there for 5 more hours. Then he's got to mop the floor. And you know what he's doing tomorrow? The same thing. And you know what he's doing the night after that? The same thing. It's a real person. And I hope it's a 14-year-old. I hope it's a 16-year-old. I hope it's even an 18-year-old. But I hope it's not a 48-year-old. But there are 48-year-olds that end up in that position. And what you do in this program is you explain that you can end up there. And actually, being a 48-year-old dishwasher is actually pretty positive to where some people can end up.
Oh, definitely.
Which is addicted to drugs, addicted to alcohol, or whatever.
Well, and everybody kind of has a sense of where they would end up if they let things auger down. And everybody has their specific weaknesses that their faults would exploit. And some people would end up homeless, and some people would end up with a physical illness or a psychiatric illness, and some people would end up addicted, and some people would end up cruel. But everybody kind of knows where they would head because they've seen it. They've seen it rise up. And it's really useful to be terrified of that as if it's a possibility. That's a heaven and hell thing, essentially. It's like, okay, well...
It's not even as if it's a possibility. It's a possibility.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's an absolute possibility.
Oh, yeah. Well, and all you have to do to get there is do nothing. Like, you'll just drift there all by yourself. So not only is it a possibility, it's actually a rather high possibility. And so you have to make that realistic enough, which means that you have to take an inventory of your weaknesses, let's say. You have to make that realistically enough so you're actually terrified of it. Because then that's a great motivation. In my clinical practice, people are often faced with tough decisions like, well, I'm not happy at my job and I'm afraid to leave it. It's like, fair enough, that's a big deal, okay? How afraid are you of not leaving it? Let's lay that out. Because, one of the peculiarities of human thought is that you do get used to the devil and then you downplay him. But it's very often that staying in the same place will do you in. It's much worse than the risk that you'll take. And I mean, I'm practical with this. I say, look, if you're going to stop your job, let's have a clue about this, right? Get your CV together, right? Start seeing what other options you have, because you don't want to just step off a cliff. That's not helpful. Organize yourself so that you've got enough strength to go through the process of finding a new job. You're going to have to get used to being interviewed. You got to think that through. Maybe we can practice that. So you got to set yourself up for it. But you really want to think through the cost of inaction. And that's something people generally don't do. And this is also one of the useful features of having a tragic view of life, let's say. Because most of the time, often, you're screwed either way. But you get to pick which one. And that's a big deal. It's like there's risks on both paths, and they're major risks. And that's actually freeing because, there's trouble both ways. So that frees you up, because if you think, well, this is the safe path and this is the dangerous path, well, then you're not going to take the dangerous path. But if you think, well, I've got danger A or danger B, and this is where I would rather bet my future, well, that's way better. And I've had like many clients that I've helped with their careers, and we do exactly that. It's like, okay, what's our goal? Our goal is to triple your salary in 4 years. They think, well, that's not possible. It's like, well, we'll try for doubling, but you don't know. It's possible. Let's get it together. And you got to get over being afraid of looking for a job. You got to get over being afraid of being interviewed. You have to put yourself together so that you've got options, and then you got to start to push. You don't know. You might be able to do it. Well, it's quite surprising how frequently that works. And that assumes the people are trying, right? They're competent. This isn't waving a magic wand or anything like that. And it takes a lot of work, like if you're going to switch jobs, you might have to, I figure 50-1 failure to success. It's something like that. And it's useful to know the baselines as well, right? Because looking for a job can be very disheartening unless you know the baselines. It's like, well, yeah, 50 resumes for one interview. Don't take it personally. It's just how it is. So it's not that you're a screw up. It's that there are way more resumes than there are jobs. And that can also, and then, don't look for a job for 8 hours a day, because you'll only be able to do that for 3 days, and then you'll die. You look for a job an hour a day, if you already have one, for an hour a day or half an hour a day for 3 months. 2 resumes a day, 3 resumes a day. You'll find a job. It'll take a while. One of my clients took like 3 years, to get her first break. But then right after that, she got another one. And then right after that, she got another one. But she stuck it out. And, it was brutal, because she had interviews and they didn't go, they didn't get the job.
Was she working in a job that she didn't like at the time?
Yeah. But I also say to people, like, generally stay in your job.
Yeah.
Because you're way more likely to get a new job when you have a job.
Yeah.
So
I always tell people, because I get the same exact thing. Hey, I'm in this job. It's miserable. I don't like it. Want to leave tomorrow. But I don't have the courage. And I've said, actually, it's going to take you more courage to stay in your current job, formulate an exit strategy, save up money, start putting together a better resume, get some technical skills that you might not have right now. Do all that while you're suffering in this job that you don't like, so that when you make the transition, which will come, it'll be the right way, and you won't end up, like you said, jumping off of a cliff.
Yeah. Well, it also makes you hopeful even in the terrible job, because then you've got some hope, and like hope is a big deal. You can put up with a lot of misery if you've got hope, but if you think, I'm miserable today and I'm going to be miserable tomorrow, and next year I'm going to be older and just as miserable, it's like that's not good. But if you think, well, I've got a plan, that's a whole different story.
Yeah, and it's a good idea for those veterans that are out there. Don't just get out. Formulate a plan. Figure out where you're going to go, and have that in place. And then you get out. You step into your next mission.
I'd really like to see the military use this future authoring program for people who are decommissioning, because you need, your idea that you need the next mission is that's exactly right. Life is like a series of missions forward, and nested in something greater than that, I think. But you need to have a plan, and you got to kind of hold the plan loosely, so because you're going to make mistakes formulating it. But the way it works basically is you aim at something in the future, and so then you start moving forward. And as you move forward, you accrue more experience and more information. Sometimes that's through failure. It doesn't matter, but you're not staying in the same place. So you're actually growing, even if you're doing badly, if you learn from those mistakes. And so then you move towards the goal, and your perspective shifts. And then you might have to modify the goal a bit, because now you're a little smarter. You think, well, that other goal wasn't helpful. It's like, yes, it was, because it moved you an inch farther ahead. And so, you kind of approach the final goal in a zigzag manner, and the zigs and the zags get less extreme as you get closer to the final goal. But you have to do a lot of zigzagging to begin with, so you got to give yourself that space for error. That's why there's an archetypal idea that the fool is the precursor to the savior, which is and you see that with comedians. Comedians are fools and they tell the truth, right? So in the court, jester is the only person who gets to tell the truth, and a fool will take a risk as well, and you need to take risks in order to progress. So that's the idea. But it also means that you have to allow yourself to make the mistakes that are necessary while you progress and not beat yourself to death about it. And so that's also really helpful, because it means that when you're formulating your plans, you can say, well, this is the best I can do now, subject to revision. It's like, great, that's good enough. Really, it's good enough. It just has to move you to the next place.
That's interesting, because obviously I've done a ton of military planning, and I would see guys that would get so wrapped around trying to make the perfect plan, and it would take them so long to plan that by the time they're ready to execute the plan, the whole target had shifted and things had moved and the battlefield had changed. They're not ready to do this anymore. So you need to come up with like you said, you need to come up with a good idea of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, and then you start to move. And as you move, you start to see things from a different angle, and you gain more intelligence, and you get another report, and all of a sudden the target shifts a little bit, but you're adapting and you're closer to the target anyways. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it is. It's also the idea that you're gaining information, because you might say, well, I don't know what to do with my life, so maybe I should just stay here and figure it out. It's like, no. If you stay there, then all you know is what you know while you're there, and you don't know enough because you can't make a plan. So make a bad plan. Even if it's actually a plan that works out so that it's opposite of what you want. If you move towards that plan, you're going to know more clearly that it's opposite of what you want. And as soon as you know that it's opposite, you know, I should be going in the other direction. So like that's not a retreat. That's an advance. And the thing is, we're active creatures, and we're always navigating through territory, right? We can't be sitting in one place and waiting. Well, you can't, because you get old. So even if you're sitting in one place, the place is changing on you. And that's just, well, you said that when you said, people make a detailed plan and then the environment will shift on them. And
on future authoring,
yeah.
Do you go back in and adjust your goals?
Yeah.
So it's something that you continually update?
Yeah. And I would say don't update it too often, right? Because then you end up in the situation you were just describing. But the idea would probably, it's something like, make your damn plan, implement it for 4 months or 6 months, and then go back and see what needs to be updated, and you'll find that you've done a lot of what you said you would, and so then it'll need to be reformulated. So, and that's also very self-affirming, I suppose is the right. It helps you understand that there's more to you than you think, which is actually the case. There is more to people than they think. That's one thing that's interesting about human beings. And so you can put yourself, you can stand up to things you're afraid of, in measured doses. And you find that you grow to be larger than the thing that you're afraid of. And, that's like one of the basic rules of clinical therapy, is like, if people are afraid of something, you break it down into pieces and you have them encounter the things they're afraid of, and they don't get less afraid. They get braver and more competent, which is way better, because there's plenty of things to be afraid of.
So once again, here's just a total alignment. I wrote this kid's book. It's called Way of the Warrior Kid.
Yeah, I read it.
Oh, okay. So I didn't know about this, but I knew what I did with my kids. And in the book, the kid's scared of water and he doesn't know how to swim. So he starts off wading in the water, and then eventually he dunks his head in the water, and then eventually he covers up to his neck in the water, and then eventually he swims a little bit, and then he finally jumps off the bridge.
Yeah.
But that's when I heard you describing that process in some interview that you were on or one of your podcasts, I said, I put that in my book, and I didn't even know it.
Yeah, it's progressive exposure. And so what you want to do, is you can do this for yourself. You think, okay, here's something I'm afraid of doing. Okay, and so I won't do it because I'm actually afraid of it. So, okay, fine, decompose it. Like, let's say you're afraid to go on a subway. You have agoraphobia. It's like, okay, go online and look at a bunch of pictures of a subway. Can you do that? Go to the subway station and look at the subway station and then go home. Or go into the subway station and open the doors and go in and then go home. But don't play tricks on yourself, right? If you say that you're going to go and just look, then just go and look and then go home, because otherwise you won't trust yourself the next time you do it. So you have to keep the bargain intact. And what you want to do is you want to push yourself a little farther than you want to go, but so that you would go. That's all you have to do. And that's kind of a rule for learning in life. So this happens. The reason it works is because this is actually how human beings learn. And so if you watch a kid, maybe let's say a kid that's a little inhibited, because some kids will just take off, but we'll use the kid that's a little inhibited. So they're around their mom and they're in the playground and there's strange kids there. Maybe they're like 4 years old, something like that. And so they're thinking about maybe that they'll go out and play. And so they hang around mom for a while and they check out the situation. And then they'll go out a little bit and check it out a bit more, and then they come back. And maybe they need a little pat or something like that, because they're coming back to home territory. Then the next time they go out a little farther, and then they'll come back. And the next time they go out a little farther, and then they'll come back. Because they want to know they can come back. And they're checking to see how far out they can go. And if you're patient and encouraging, even with kids that are quite nervous, you encourage them to keep going out and exploring, then they'll habituate, and what they do is learn they're competent, and away they go. And so it's not surprising that graduated exposure works, because that is actually how human beings learn to confront the world. But it's a great technique. And
the story in the book, it wasn't, my daughter had stage fright, but she wanted to be in the school musical. And so it was started with her in her room singing by herself, but I was outside the door with the door shut.
Yeah.
And then it was, okay, you sing, but the door was open. And this happened over, a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Now the door is open. Now I'm going to stand in the doorway. Now mom and I are going to stand in the doorway. Now we're actually going to come in and sit down and watch you sing. And then it was the family's going to watch you sing. And then the neighbors are going to come watch you sing. And eventually she has no issues whatsoever right now. Very confident kid. But that was...
Yeah, that's perfect.
I translated it into the water for the story for whatever reason. But yeah.
Yeah, well, that also means that, see, what I like about that story too is that you established an individual relationship with your daughter. Because kids have different temperaments. So like some kids, if you take them to the playground, it's like they're like you put them down on the ground, they're like puppies over water. Their feet will be going before they hit the ground, and they're just gone, right? They're out there playing with the kids. Those are extroverted kids who don't have very high levels of negative emotion. And your problem is going to be that they'll run off too far, So, but then other kids are they're more inhibited. And often they're a little more introverted, they're a little higher in negative emotion. So then what you want to do is calibrate, and you have to watch. It's like, okay, how much can this kid tolerate? It's like, we'll push it. And you can figure that out. It's like it has to, you have to push them enough so that if they accomplish it, they feel that that's an accomplishment. It can't be too easy, but it can't be too hard. You want to put them right on that edge. That's the edge between order and chaos, right? Fundamentally, you want to put them on that edge and let them experience what it's like to be there. And then they also learn that they can be there. Because, you taught her two things. You taught her that she could sing in front of a group, but you also taught her that she could learn to do something she was afraid of doing. And that's a way better lesson, right? That's a killer lesson. So that's good. That means, and you can do that with kids too, with graduated reward. Like, you can watch them, and if they do something, well, I'll tell you how I did this with my daughter. So my daughter had arthritis, and it was really bad, and she had to learn to give herself she had to take injections every day. And so, and then I think that started when she was like 7. And so we could give her the injections, but she was pretty skittish about that, and no wonder, because they hurt and everything. So I thought, all right, to hell with this. We'll get her to do her own injections. And so I sat her down and I said, she was pretty motivated by money. She's always been kind of a capitalist kid, eh? So we found her outside once when she was 4 selling all her child books on the street, which was quite funny. I think she was maybe 5, but whatever. I said, look, kiddo, I'm going to give you this needle, and if you can inject this yourself in 45 minutes, I'll give you $50. And so I let her sit, and she struggled with that. But by about 30 minutes she did it. And I thought, good work, man, good work. So then the next time I said, okay, this time it's $30, but you got 10 minutes to do it. And so she did it. And soon we got it down so that, because I wanted to get it down so there was no hesitation, right? Because actually the anticipatory anxiety is worse than the needle. So you want to push it. So it's like, okay, now, and we got to the point where it was, if you can do it in 5 seconds, I'll give you $10. And so she got to the point, took about a week, where she could do it in 5 seconds. And I kept paying her because, well, for obvious reasons, it was kind of unfortunate. She was very sick, and she had these needles, and we had to do some things that would sort of perk her up, to some degree. But that was a hard thing for a kid to learn, It's not an easy thing to give yourself a needle, but you can use that graduated exposure and careful reward. You can get kids to do very brave things, and then they also learn how tough they are. It's like, and she was proud of that, man. that she could go and do it by herself, because that was a big deal. It also gave her some control over her illness.
Yeah.
So competence, that's what you want to instill in your kids, unless you're jealous of them. So